the purpose of today's webinar, which Laura I think sent out a little memo about, is for contemplating the next steps following a booze break. So people who've maybe taken a month off, or a couple of weeks, or even several months off alcohol, and are reflecting on what they want to do next going forward, whether that's a temporary experiment in trying to drink again, or to remain sober for an extended period or for life. So just as a warning, this webinar is going to be more appropriate probably for people who haven't yet come to the decision that they're best off without alcohol permanently. This is for people who are still deciding what role alcohol might play in their life, people who are still contemplating moderation or controlled drinking or occasional drinking, whatever that looks like for them. So if you've already decided and determined alcohol's not for you, you might find this webinar a bit annoying, because it's talking about moderation a lot, and or it might be just not as useful for you. So like I say, this is for people who are potentially contemplating moderation following an extended break from alcohol of a month or more. And I see we've had 4 people join. I'm going to just carry on, and I apologise for people who are watching this later on YouTube that it's not landscape, but I discovered that putting my phone in landscape meant that my face was pointing in a completely different direction than to the screen, so I'm in portrait. Apologies for that. So I'm not seeing any questions appear below the screen, and I'm not sure if that's because that just doesn't happen anymore, but welcome to everyone who's joined. Oh, hi Ali. Yeah, great, I can see messages. Brilliant. Welcome to everyone who's joined and joining later and watching back later. So there's been obviously Sober October has happened for some people, although we're nearly midway through November. Other people take months off alcohol during the year. A lot of people will do it in January, and often people have come to the decision to take an extended period off alcohol because of problems with alcohol. And I have clients speak to me a lot in groups that I run, privately, and in the public sector services, drug and alcohol service that I work at also. People often want to know where they are on some fixed spectrum of alcohol problems, if you like, or addiction. And as much as it can be really annoying when therapists reflect back questions to the client and ask them what they think that means, the reason I do that is because usually people have come to a group or to therapy or to ask a professional questions because one reason or another alcohol has started to cause them problems, and therefore, in my view, that means they've got an alcohol problem, because alcohol is causing them health problems, behavioural problems, having unwanted consequences for themselves or others, because they just don't like how they're drinking, why they're drinking. So, you know, typically somebody who's referred themselves has already determined that there's something problematic about what they're doing and how they're using alcohol. So at that point, it's still very diverse how much a person is drinking when it gets to the point where they think they've got a problem with the booze. Some people may drink problematically once every now and again because it's a ginormous binge that leaves them feeling wretched for a variety of reasons, some of which are, you know, the mental kind of disturbance that happens in the brain after a big binge, and also big binges can often lead to the worst consequences, such as, you know, accidents, sometimes violence, aggression, arguments with you know, special people in our lives, you know, lost phones, lost keys, dangerous decisions such as using unlicensed taxis, unsafe sex, and, you know, at the far end of the spectrum, you have trouble with the police and things like that. So sometimes people don't drink very often, but when they do, boy, do they drink, and the problems are huge when they do, and that's the kind of drinking they want to stop. Those people will often take or leave alcohol in the week. They wouldn't drink at home. They don't really think about drinking after work. If they've got nothing going on socially, they may not even mind not drinking some weekends. But when they do have a reason to drink, such as a party or a stag night or a lads' night out or girls' night out, work party, then they don't have an off switch, as they say, and all hell breaks loose. Other people are the reverse, and I've discovered myself in this other category after my mum passed away, which was a sort of daily steady drinking. Not really a binge ever. Sometimes the person might go into the second bottle of wine for a glass, but often they're just drinking slow and steady, the same amount every night, often in the same place, at home or in the same pub. But they're not really having any nights off. They're feeling the effects maybe in just terms of general sluggishness, in losing their oomph, about having a bad morning routine, always feeling on the back foot, certainly starting to look puffy, a bit grey around the face, bit of weight gain as well normally comes with that, dropping the ball on various sort of life admin duties, because they're just sort of drinking every evening. Nothing problematic's happening in terms of their behaviours that would cause them any trouble, but nevertheless it's chipping away at them, their energy, and their mood, possibly damaging their sleep, because regular drinking can really damage our sleep architecture as well. So yeah, people can go from daily drinking, daily steady drinking, well over government guidelines, but no negative behavioural consequences, through to occasional really hardcore binges with lots and lots of consequences for the person. But whatever the reason the person determines to take a month off, I think it's because they've decided they don't like the reasons why they're drinking, how much they're drinking, what happens when they do drink. And one of the most important things, I think, to begin with, is to not look at comparing ourselves to other people when we're deciding what to do for ourselves, because what's best for us will be very, very unique. We can learn from other people. That's why groups like Club Soda are so fantastic. And one of the things I love so much about Club Soda, why I'm still involved with Club Soda and endorse Club Soda to other people, is because they offer an opportunity for people to pursue a variety of goals around their drinking, from moderation for short-term breaks through to lifetime abstinence. And it's pretty unusual in online world to find a community that does provide support for people who are looking for moderation, at least as their first goal. So when people do take a break from booze, it's because they've decided there's a problem for them, and it could be something as simple as they want to get healthy and lose some weight, and get their kind of diet and nutrition on track, and alcohol's not really part of a very nutritious diet, through to there's some really bad consequences for them, really kind of severe behavioural consequences, and for people with mental health disturbances and diagnoses, alcohol can really, really interfere with those, as well as the medication and therapy that might otherwise help them. So lots of reasons to take a month off. They're all unique and personal reasons, and finding what your reasons are and holding on to them is really important, because as a problem kind of recedes into the distance, the original reason why we were motivated to say stop drinking, once we've had a month off, then those reasons aren't quite so valid. We're already looking better. We've maybe dropped a bit of weight. We've learned that we can take some time off. We're questioning whether we ever had a problem in the first place. We're already wondering whether we can return to a sort of more moderate form of drinking again. And that's because the reasons that motivated us to take some time off are kind of less relevant now, because they're further away. And that kind of tends to be the brain works. It doesn't have a very good memory for the bad, and it will overemphasize the good. So something to kind of hold on to are the reasons why you wanted to make a change, and considering those reasons, think about whether it's possible to return to drinking in a way that you would prefer to return to drinking. Second to that, also, to your reasons for wanting to stop for a while, are what more moderate or controlled drinking would look like for you. And again, this is for you personally. There are government guidelines. They're 14 units a week for men and women. By the UK standards, that's an incredibly low amount of alcohol, although it's the level at which they can sort of more confidently say there are no risks. but no one knows for sure, of course. But those 14 units are a guideline, but for most of my clients, their idea of moderating can fall some way from that. Sometimes it might be around 30 or 40 units a week. Some people are happy to return to drinking that much with 3 or 4 days off. That would actually mean that the 3 days they did drink would still be classed as binges, but that's up to the person what they're happiest with and what's an improvement on what's gone before. Some people like to think that for them moderate drinking would be only drinking when there's a special occasion, which would be really infrequently during the year. Special occasions might mean birthdays, Christmases, New Year, a couple of weddings and holidays. And the rest of the time, nothing's a special occasion, particularly Fridays and Saturday nights are not usually special unless there's a party or event. So for those people, they'd be drinking quite infrequently during the year. And for other people, they don't want to drink in the week. They want to drink at weekends. They don't want to drink by themselves. They only want to drink when they're social. They only want to drink when they're happy, not when they're sad. Everyone's, if you like, perfect drinking habit is going to be different. So if you are contemplating returning to drinking after a break, it's worthwhile really being specific with yourself. Well, what do I mean by moderate drinking from this point forward? Now I've had a month off or whatever, 3 months off, 100 days off. After knowing that I don't need alcohol to really do anything, what am I going, how am I going to be drinking going forward? What are my rules going to be? Because you're going to need them, because without them you're going to potentially drift back to previous drinking levels, which, if you remember, you weren't happy with because you wanted to take a break. So setting some limits is going to be important for yourself. Something that I find comes up a lot when people take a month off alcohol is one of their first rules is that maybe they're going to return to drinking, but they're not going to drink in the week, which is quite standard for people. They want to feel fresh for work and don't want to just drink for the sake of it on the sofa in front of the telly. But if the first of the month after they've had their month off falls on a weekday, they still would drink on that day to celebrate their month off. So in a way, they're breaking their rule the minute the month off alcohol's over, because, the 1st of February, for example, falls on a Wednesday. So to celebrate having a dry January, they'll drink on a Wednesday, even though their goal or aim was to not drink until the weekend. So we need to have goals so then we know that we're sticking to them, and they need to be specific for most people to avoid us giving ourselves too much flexible opportunities to sort of rob from Peter to pay Paul. Oh, I'll drink on Wednesday, but then I won't drink all weekend. I'm drinking, Friday, Saturday and Sunday this week, but that's fine because I've got nothing in the diary for the next 2 weeks. So I'll do all my drinking now and then have a longer period of time off. And we can keep kind of moving those goalposts if we let ourselves, because we keep basically procrastinating change. It's never quite the right time today. Future Helen is going to be healthy, but present day Helen just wants to have what she wants, and be comfortable and pursue all of her needs and wishes. But, definitely next week, Helen's going to be healthy and stick to all of her goals and plans and resist all of her urges. So if you're potentially considering returning to drinking, really review all the reasons why you wanted to take a break first, because those reasons should still be important to you if you do decide to return to moderate or occasional drinking again. And they're the reasons that may make you want to give up alcohol for longer or permanently as well. And the other thing to do is then to put some clear guidelines in place about what to you personally constitutes a healthier relationship with alcohol. And what that would look like for you, the conditions under which you would and wouldn't drink, the amount you would drink, the frequency of your drinking, etc. And then it remains for you to look at how you're going to manage that, considering you probably weren't managing that before. If you needed to take a break from alcohol because you were having problems with alcohol, you obviously weren't able to, at that point, stick to your hoped for limits. And you were always breaking them and going over them and drinking on nights you hadn't planned to, or drinking more than you'd intended to. So you need to think about whether you really can manage to stick to this sort of new reduced amount of alcohol, and then think about how you might go about that. And a lot of the solutions for drinking less than we used to are to be filling our lives with lots of other stuff. There's my Game of Thrones mug there. Bit of a fan. And the techniques that you'll need to moderate your drinking will be different depending on what kind of drinker you were. If you used to come home every night and just buy a bottle of wine on your way home from work and going to the supermarket, if you've had a month of alcohol, you've obviously managed not to do that for a month, so you know full well you can manage to do that for the rest of your life if you wanted to. There's no physical drive for you to ever buy a bottle of wine at the supermarket again. You've shown yourself that. But if you are intending to sometimes do that but sometimes not, then you really need to make some plans so that you avoid those old habits, because they can be quite ingrained. So think about what you'll do differently at the times when you used to drink mindlessly to avoid drinking. And for a lot of people that includes, being more active, doing more, exercise maybe after work, potentially switching out what you do socially. I know it's quite a trite expression to join clubs and find other friends, but it is quite often really important to have other things to do, whether that's book clubs, physical exercise, things like yoga or relaxation, learning new languages, having slightly different friends. Hello everybody who's joining, Alan, Becca, Butch, Joe and the people above, and finding new things to do is quite difficult as adults in a way, because we are quite set in our ways and our routines. People with families have family routines and schedules as well. But changing your relationship with alcohol really should be about everything but alcohol. It's about, as one of my clients says, and I repeat it quite regularly in a moderation drinking group I run and with individual clients, is also the more you put into your life that's not alcohol or alcohol related, the less room there is for alcohol. So in a sense, you're filling yourself up from the top and you're just pushing alcohol out your feet. That's the way she described it. Don't know if she made that metaphor up or if she got it from some mindfulness or Buddhist meditations, because she's also into that practice. But she talks about putting things in, nurturing herself by putting stuff into her life and her body, and almost in a way in her imagination she envisages that sort of pushing alcohol down and out, almost sort of dripping out her toes, because there's less room for it in her life. And I really like the idea of that, because it's looking at filling the hole and filling the void and putting things in. If we just focus on the behaviour we're not doing and don't want to do, that could be quite a negative mindset to constantly have, going around in our head. I will not be doing this, I don't want to do this, I'm going to be resisting doing this, I need to resist this. Of course we need to think those things, because we'll have urges and habits and triggers and temptations. So we do need to be vigilant, and we will sometimes need to be making a conscious effort to simply resist an urge. But a lot of the time I think we can be more positive and just think about putting things into our life that makes alcohol have less of a place in it. Alcohol becomes incompatible with our other goals and values. It becomes incongruent with who we are becoming, and there's just less space and time for it. And lots of people, make that decision almost without thinking about it for other drugs. Majority of people who were even very heavy clubbers and took a lot of ecstasy or speed and went clubbing in their youth typically just grow up and out of that. Yes, people can develop substance misuse problems with those substances well into their later years, but the majority of people who try those drugs and quite like them for a period of time do just grow out of them. And people might smoke cannabis at university and kind of just stop doing that because, you know, it's incompatible with their other life goals. And a lot of people do kind of grow up or through lots of other drug use, which they maybe do for a period of time in their life. But with alcohol, it kind of hangs around the longest. Admittedly, that's because it's not an illegal substance, so we don't have to take any risks to obtain it, which they're the kind of risks maybe young people are more prepared to make and less prepared to make as they get older. But I also think that the kind of lifestyle around other drugs becomes incompatible with our lives as we grow up, whereas with alcohol, it grows up with us. What we are using it for changes. You know, it's the trusty dog by our side through thick and thin. So one of the solutions to drinking less or stopping drinking completely is to think about putting things into our lives. And through doing that, we're pushing alcohol out, but we don't necessarily have to think so consciously about alcohol all the time. It's not, how will I not drink tonight, but what am I going to be doing tonight? And that might be simple stuff like having a nice bath and preparing a meal for that night and lunch for the following day. It may be a club or a physical activity or a community or spiritual activity, depending on what you're involved in. But I do think that an important part of the solution is filling our lives and enriching our lives in other ways, which kind of means that we don't have to feel so deprived, because we're actually nourishing ourselves with other things. We're not just depriving ourselves of one thing, we're nourishing ourselves with lots of others. So that's something that, and I do really like that metaphor from my client, with kind of rinsing it away, pushing it out and rinsing it out of her toes. So that's something to sort of think about if you can find a visual kind of metaphor to think about what you're putting into your life and your body and your mind, that can then push alcohol out without making such a conscious effort to do so. If you want to ask me any questions, because I can ramble on and I will answer questions if any are typed up. But something that I thought I would also talk about, and Laura and Yusi and you possibly know that it's one of my big things, is that when we're coming to make change, one of the things we need to do is sort of overcome procrastination, or putting off that change until another, imaginary point in the future when it's a much better time to make that change. And the other thing we need to overcome is low frustration tolerance and low discomfort tolerance. We need to become better at tolerating frustration, and we need to become better at tolerating some discomfort, and that will get us through this sort of postponing change as well. A book that I can really recommend you read, I think it might still be in print, but it's not very expensive on Amazon, is this, Beating the Comfort Trap by Wendy Dryden and Jack Gordon. This is a book that's grounded in the principles of rational emotive behaviour therapy, which is a form of psychological therapy or cognitive behavioural therapy that I mostly practice and utilise in my life and my work. And it's a cognitive behavioural therapy basically, but one of the main features of it is that it emphasises the fact that people need to learn to tolerate discomfort and frustration better, and through doing so we'll experience less distress when we are uncomfortable and we are frustrated, which is an inevitable reality of life. I think procrastination of health behaviour change is a huge issue in society, because majority of people do not need more advice about what's healthy and unhealthy. They often don't need much advice about how to go, what they should do to be healthier. People who are overweight know that to lose weight they need to eat less and move more, and what they do eat should be as fresh as possible, food, and that's about it. Meanwhile, a multi-billion-dollar industry of diet and fitness industry exists, even though moving more and eating less is literally the answer, and you didn't need to give me 10 billion quid to learn that tonight. But nevertheless, there's a huge diet and fitness industry because people are still looking for solutions, even though they know what the solution is. Partly they want a quick fix, partly they want a solution that seems to not require them to make any sacrifices. I think that's partly why things like the Atkins diets were quite popular, because you could just, put a bit of butter on top of a bit of cheese, chuck some egg and bacon on top, and you were dieting. Crikey, that really suited people because they were not depriving themselves. They were not feeling uncomfortable usually in the process of doing that diet, although they were restricting a whole macronutrient. And I think that the industries like the diet industry, and to an extent, the addiction industry as well, is there because people are constantly looking for solutions. And when people are physically dependent on something, they obviously need a medical intervention. They need a detox to come off alcohol, otherwise it's dangerous to come off alcohol without a detox if you're heavily physically dependent. But anyone who's just taken a month off alcohol and feels okay knows that they're not physically dependent, and they probably weren't when they started, and they certainly aren't a month later. So the reality is now, if you don't want to drink anymore, you've shown yourself that you don't need to and that you were able to not. And the next decision is how much discomfort and frustration and am I prepared to tolerate to not drink again, because there will be moments when you'll have an urge and you would rather give into it, and it will feel uncomfortable to not, and it can feel frustrating to be living a slightly different life than your friends and your family are, and that can feel frustrating. It can feel frustrating to have got to the point in your life where somewhere along the line you reached a tipping point where you were no longer as in control of alcohol as you would like to be and other people were. So that can be frustrating because you no longer have that opportunity to not worry about your drinking, which maybe some of your peers or acquaintances still have that relaxed approach to alcohol that maybe you haven't, because you've discovered you've got a bit of a problem with it. So that can be frustrating, can feel unfair. And to live a slightly different social life to many of the people in our circle can be frustrating, and it can be uncomfortable to have to make effort to do different things in the evening than just plonk the telly on and plonk ourselves in front of it with a bottle of wine. That's easy, that's convenient, that's what we've always done. So therefore it's not uncomfortable to do what we've always done, and it's not frustrating because we're not denying ourselves anything or resisting an urge. But we will need to be better at tolerating frustration and discomfort if we want to make changes, positive, meaningful change, in the face of habits that for some people are habits of many decades, but certainly many years, and unfortunately in the face of a society that still has an enormous amount of alcohol in it, alcohol selling and consuming establishments in it. And people who are customers of those establishments. So we are in a world where plenty of people don't drink. We probably don't know many of them, but it can also be frustrating to live in that kind of society. So we need to overcome these feelings or thoughts that things are not fair or are too difficult, and accept that that's okay. If in pursuit of a more meaningful goal, we can tolerate more discomfort and more frustration than we maybe have in the past by always giving into an urge. Has anyone got any questions regarding their own moderation or their own return to drinking? There's been some, and I've talked about this before, and it comes up in nearly every controlled drinking group that I run in an NHS service as well, that if you're going to return to controlled drinking or moderate drinking or occasional drinking, whatever you feel is a good way to describe it for you, because it's still a controversial matter for people who've decided to quit the booze for good, that other people are still contemplating maybe a moderation approach to alcohol, but it's a feasible goal. I'm all for harm minimisation. I work with people who consume all sorts of substances, and although it may look more sensible or practical to quit anything for good, if somebody wants to look at reducing their use of anything, I'm totally on board with that goal and to help them achieve that, because that will reduce the harms to them and possibly others of whatever it is that they're taking, alcohol or whatever. So being moderate is a harm minimisation approach for you, and it's a viable goal for a majority of people who haven't developed physical dependency on alcohol. But one of the things that people find is that they can manage days off alcohol better than controlling alcohol on the days they do drink. Now, this will in part relate to how much you drink anyway on your drinking sessions. But, for instance, if your previous drinking was, let's say, a bottle of wine every night, 7 nights a week, can't remember when I last had a night off, which is the point at which I got to when my mum passed away for a couple of years. It was self-soothing and not processing the grief in an appropriate way. But I could go out and it would be about the same amount. I could be in and it would be the same amount. It wouldn't go up and it wouldn't go down. I'd obviously got very used to the mental health effects, if you like, of that quantity of alcohol. I didn't really pursue it further after I'd had about that much, but I didn't normally drink any less than that, unless I started so late and I was tired and I just ran out of time to drink. But it's typically about a bottle of wine on average every night, in or out, about 9 units an evening. So for that type of person, they're after a month off alcohol or more, they may decide, okay, I'm going to return to not drinking Monday to Thursday, or Sunday to Thursday, or school nights, or whatever you call it. But I will drink on Friday evenings and Saturday evenings and on Sunday lunch, and I'll have wine. But I only want to have 2 glasses on each of those nights rather than the full bottle. So, you know, that's an appropriate goal. That's even approaching government guidelines. So it's positive. But as much as you might think it would be difficult for them to have all those nights off in the week when they have previously been drinking every night, the difference between nights when you're not drinking at all and nights when you are drinking is that you're sober when you're not drinking, and all of the decisions you make for that whole day you make as a sober person. But when you are hoping to have a moderate night of drinking, such as the 2 glasses of wine evening, you're sober when you make that plan at the beginning of the day. You're even sober when you open that bottle of wine to pour the first glass. But then once you've had 2 glasses of wine, you're drunk. Not fall over drunk, but your brain, is under the influence of alcohol. So any decisions you make are going to be flawed by the sheer fact that you've got alcohol in your system, and alcohol makes us poor decision makers. It makes us far more focused on our present comfort than any possible future benefits or consequences. It just makes us kind of myopic and short-sighted. So resisting the urge to drink at all, weirdly, for many people, they find that easier. And they go to bed earlier, they notice they're tired earlier in the evening, they listen to their body. Yes, they maybe feel a little bit bored, so they go to bed earlier too. But they typically, potter about in the evening and get things done and do a bit of exercise and maybe prepare their meal for the next day, their lunch for the next day, and get a little bit organised about things they wouldn't have done before, and then go to bed earlier than they used to, and then get a decent night's sleep and start all over again. But then come the weekend or the Friday night, once they've had the 2 glasses of wine, stopping at that can be really difficult because they're intoxicated by the 6 units of wine they've already drunk. And then their decision making has been the baton of decision making has been handed to their drunk self rather than their sober self. The drunk teenager is behind the wheel of the car rather than the sober adult. So that can present a problem for controlled drinking that's quite unique, because the types of strategies you will need to use to be moderate on the nights you are drinking You might need to be quite crafty with those kinds of techniques. I don't know if you've ever seen the film Paycheck. It's a Ben Affleck film where I think he gets his memory erased and something like that. But because he knows he's going to get his memory erased, he leaves himself all sorts of devious clues for himself to find in the future to sort of trigger his memory. And sometimes I feel we need to paycheck ourselves. If we're going to be drinking but we want to stop at a certain point, we need to paycheck ourselves when we're still sober. So we need to, if you like, get the plans in place when we're sober so that our drunk self doesn't really have as many opportunities to make bad decisions. For some of my clients who are wine drinkers, and you know, people always bulk at this, but if your long-term aim is to be a moderate drinker rather than save a couple of quid, it shouldn't be a problem. But if you only want to drink 2 glasses of wine and you're the only wine drinker, you know, in this experience, and you're not sure you're going to be able to stop at 2 once you've had the 2, pour a glass's worth away from the bottle before you even begin. Pour it down the sink if you need to. Some people decant it or whatnot, but then it's still in the house. And yes, that's not ideal, because one should be in a situation where one can just trust oneself around alcohol. But you know, the chances are you might struggle to do that once you've had 2 drinks. So something like pouring away the first third of the bottle so it's just not there when you've drunk 2 glasses of wine is a way of paychecking yourself. The sober self poured it away because it knew the drunk self wouldn't. People do similar tricks when they're going out for the evening. They'll, you know, only take a certain amount of money, not take their cards, and things like that, so they're not as able to drink more than they'd kind of planned. Other times people tell everyone around them what their plans are, because social support and encouragement actually can help, whether it's as a stick or as a carrot. If other people know what we're trying to achieve, they can prompt us about that if we're starting to forget. But again, that depends on the person and the social groups they're in, because not everyone wants people to know what they're doing, and not everyone would respond without anger or irritation if somebody reminded them that they'd said they weren't going to have any more than 3 pints and they're about to get their 4th. That could make some people feel cross or stressed. So it might be that telling other people what your plans are is something that would work for you, if that kind of accountability and support's useful. You know, restricting the amount of money you have, pouring some away to begin with. There could be different techniques, such as if you arrive first and you get the first round in, so when you're still sober, you can go to the bar and buy everyone's drinks and buy yourself a non-alcoholic drink. So while you're sober, you get yourself a non-alcoholic drink when it's your round, and then you're 1 drink kind of saved in the bank, because no one knows you ordered it. It could be a non-alcoholic beer or something, no one knows it is. And then by the time it's someone else's round, you're ready for one of your 2 drinks or one of your 3 drinks. So it's about strategies that would work for you. Bearing in mind you're going to be drunk for a portion of that evening. By drunk, I mean intoxicated by the alcohol in your bloodstream. I don't mean you're going to be acting drunk, but you will be under the influence of alcohol once you're 2 or 3 drinks in. So think about techniques and strategies for your moderation, because that's probably the thing that trips people up the most. And also it's the thing that I see people most upset by, because they set out to drink a certain amount and they get very upset when they drank over that, and they can find that very distressing. And if they've had something like a month off, or they haven't drunk all week, they can't quite understand why, despite proving to themselves they don't have a problem, and they definitely don't, because they've had all that time off. Then when they do take their foot off the brake, they still don't seem to have any control, and it can be quite distressing for people. So think about how you can avoid distressing yourself by laying appropriate plans for yourself, paychecking yourself in advance if need be, so that you're less likely to overdrink. And by overdrink, I mean over what you'd set yourself as your limit for that evening, an amount of alcohol that won't make you feel distressed or guilty or ashamed the following day. because that's what we don't want. If you want to be a moderate drinker, we don't probably want to be feeling ashamed or guilty about the drinking. We want to feel like we planned it. Sometimes I call it planned letting go. I plan to let go a little bit and have a couple of drinks, and I know that that's going to be in my bloodstream, and therefore I'm going to be using, changing the way I feel a little bit with the alcohol. But what I don't want are the effects that I would normally have if I drink too much, whether those effects are behavioural, such as aggression or anger or being upset or crying, or whether it's things the next day, the anxiety and the feelings of dread that can come after a big drinking session, or where we just drank more than we wanted to. So think about how you'll manage your drinking on the times you do drink, because you don't want to be distressing yourself by not achieving that. Something else, however, that relates back to low frustration tolerance is the fact that some people wish or want or hope that by having some time off, they've somehow reset themselves, and or they shouldn't have to then carry on exerting control when they drink, because for some reason they're kind of cured and they'll only have a couple. Next time I go out for a drink with my friends, I'll only have a couple because I've just had a month off. I couldn't possibly drink more. And the reality is that we can quite easily go back to where we were before, and we may need to put some effort into not going back there. It's not like we kind of rewrite our genetic code or revert back to an unblemished baby's mind that had never consumed alcohol before. We have consumed alcohol, and even a month off isn't enough to completely reset that side of things. We still have lots of pleasurable to the mind because of dopamine, pleasurable memories of alcohol, of what it did and how it made us feel, and that could be why people kind of do glamorize drinking. They can awfulize abstinence, and then they can have a euphoric recall about drinking, because they're sort of remembering these sort of dopamine soaked memories of alcohol, forgetting all of the bad stuff, because it's those dopamine soaked memories, that the pleasurable memories, that are far more easily recalled and are more powerful and hang around a long time, even after periods of time off alcohol, and for some people even after years off alcohol. So maybe let go of the idea or the demand that having had a period of time off alcohol, you've been completely reset. I hope it happens for you, but it may well not. The first drink or two after a month off can feel a bit metallic-y tasting, or not as nice tasting as you'd thought it was from memory, or hoped it would be. And getting a bit drunk can be unpleasant, and the hangover can be bad for a day or two, but it can still be quite easy to drift back to where you were before. So accept that and be okay about that. Be proud that you've shown yourself exactly what you can achieve, because we can't unknow what we know. When you've had a month off, you can't unknow that you did that. You can't unknow that you coped, that you survived, that it wasn't painful. It wasn't even as bad as stubbing your toe in terms of pain. There may be some discomfort in terms of missing out on a couple of social events because you just couldn't be bothered to go and not drink. It may be that you slightly were jealous of the people who were drinking, but again, the discomfort wasn't intolerable because you tolerated it. And once you've shown yourself that you can achieve that, you can't not know that again. And if it may be the case when you've tried some moderate drinking around the goals that you set for yourself, that you decide that it's so much of an effort to control your drinking on the nights you do drink, because of all the need to regulate yourself and manage yourself and trick yourself into not drinking more than you planned and all that kind of stuff. It may just not be worth the effort, and some people do just say, you know what, I'd rather just say I don't drink. It's a far simpler decision. Our brain likes simple kind of programming. It likes a simple heuristic, and if it's do you drink or would you like a drink and the answer's always no, that's a simpler kind of lesson for the brain to learn. That's a simpler response to kind of get into making. A bit like me, you know, would you like a cigarette? Do you smoke? No, I don't smoke. And that's been for 8 years. It's not maybe I do, you know, but do I smoke today? Or should I smoke tomorrow? If I smoke, what will I smoke? Shall it be one cigarette? Should I buy my own? You know, how will I not smoke the rest of the packet? You can't even buy packets of 10 anymore. So I have to buy a packet of 20. And you know, it needs to be a binary decision for me around smoking. Is an on or an off, and it's off now. And for some people, they find that kind of binary on or off easier with alcohol as well. It's just off, party's over, I'm done. I used to drink, I don't anymore, you know, because then we're just always making one decision, and the answer and the decision's always no, and not no thank you, and not today. Whereas if with moderate drinking, for some people, that involves so many micro decisions about how much, with who, when to start, when to stop, what to drink, how many units, what time to get home, how to limit it, how to make sure I don't drink too much, etc, 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 that all those micro decisions are almost, you know, negate the purpose of getting drunk, which was to sort of have a bit of fun and let go. But if they let go, they'll probably drink too much, so they're kind of not letting go whilst they're trying to let go. It's a really strange situation to be in, and it could be one that people just decide they can't be bothered with it, and by never drinking, they almost find their decision making about alcohol simpler and easier. It's not without its urges, but at least they're not giving themselves very woolly parameters around alcohol. They're giving themselves very firm, narrow ones. And that can be easier for people. You can let go. That's one thing I don't have to think about, because the answer is I don't drink, and that's that. I've hung up my drinking cap, and I'm tapping out now, like people tap out of other drugs that they use when they're younger, like ecstasy or cannabis. They hang up their cannabis hat when they get to an age where it's no longer relevant in their life. And it's incompatible with other things that they're doing or want to be doing. And for some people, maybe that they come to that point with alcohol when they get to a certain age, or when alcohol has become a certain amount of problematic in their life. So I'm aware there's 3 people live now. And I'm not sure if any of you have any questions, if you're moderators now, or if you're just coming off some time off alcohol and are hoping to return to drinking, or contemplating whether you should or will. Do let me know if you've got any questions. I think that the benefit of Club Soda is that you've got sort of the main community and sub-communities of people who can support you, whatever you're trying to achieve. There are people who are seeking moderation, and there are people who've tried that and have moved on to a more long-term sort of period of time off alcohol. So the beauty of having a community that accepts all of those goals is that you don't have to do any of this alone, and there will be similarities between people who are trying to moderate. Like I say, where people are when they start drinking, and then where they're at when it becomes so problematic they think about stopping, will be different for everyone. And one person's idea of moderate drinking won't be another person's idea of moderate drinking, but you can certainly gain support from one another in the community, and I think that's great. It's very difficult to find online communities that don't only emphasise sobriety. So do use the support of the group, and you can. I only activated my Facebook account again to do this webinar. I don't actually have an active account the rest of the time, because it was sucking lots of my time, actually, Facebook. But I think you can still send me private messages on Facebook. I have Facebook Messenger. Laura or UC can also forward me private emails, which I will answer confidentially. If you've got any specific questions about your drinking or loved ones drinking or where next. I'm doing another couple of webinars, one just before Christmas, I think, on sort of managing Christmas and New Year, and another one in the spring, I think, or in February or March or something like that. So I am around, and I'm more than happy to answer questions if you have any, or any concerns, or if you disagree with anything I've said, because moderate drinking, controlled drinking is a controversial topic in some parts of, like Russell said, the addiction industry. It can be a controversial topic, and it can be a difficult one to ask about, because so many people are living a sober life and aren't able to contemplate a moderation approach. So I'm aware that there's some controversy around it, but I'm happy to talk about it because I believe it's harm minimisation, and I think that's an absolutely adequate goal for people to be looking at, and people decide for themselves if they want to go for full abstinence, but they usually need to give this sort of middle ground a go first, and for some people they achieve it, and it might not be without its efforts, but those efforts might be worthwhile making for you. So until next time, and if you do want to ask me any questions offline, feel free, and it's been lovely to see you all, and happy winter solstice is coming. Take care. Bye.